Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW, or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information@CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcasts and give us any constructive feedback.
The Herald, Tuesday the 14th of June 2022. News. Farmers and scientists disappointed by gene editing snub. This article is by Andrew Learmonth. The Scottish Government's rejection of new gene editing legislation has been criticised by farmers and scientists. Over the weekend, Environment Secretary Mary McAllen dismissed the UK Government's proposed genetic technology precision breeding bill, which seeks to ease regulations around the relatively new technology. George Eustace, the Secretary of State at the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, has asked his counterparts in Edinburgh and Cardiff to back the new law. He claimed the technology could help tackle the challenges of our age. However, Ms McAllen reiterated that the Scottish Government's position on gene editing is to stay aligned with the EU's regulatory regime, which effectively means gene editing is classified as a category of genetically modified organism, GMO. Martin Kennedy, the president of the NFU Scotland, said he was disappointed by the decision. He told the Herald that precision breeding techniques had considerable potential to deliver benefits for food, nutrition, agriculture, biodiversity and climate change, and build on the significant amount of work that Scottish farmers and crofters are already undertaking to establish more sustainable and resilient farming systems. Mr Kennedy said the Union would now look to Brussels, where the EU has recently launched a consultation decoupling gene editing from GMO. The UK Government's new legislation was welcomed by Professor Leslie Torrance, the Director of Science at the James Hutton Institute. She said crops derived through precision breeding techniques, such as gene editing, could also be derived by traditional breeding and are thus indistinguishable from crops bred conventionally. Professor Torrance added, understanding how traits are controlled in crops is crucial to addressing the very real threats posed to our future food security. We need to develop crops quickly which can adapt and are resistant to climate change and pests, and whose cultivation is more environmentally friendly. The application of precision breeding research is already happening in some countries, which may result in crops which are easier to grow, more climate positive, require less use of biocides and fertiliser, and potentially more economically viable. It will be up to the consumer to weigh up the merit of these different approaches, and we need to do the science and provide the evidence that helps with those decisions. The debate has been overshadowed by a constitutional row over the controversial Internal Market Act, which means that items that meet regulatory standards in one part of the country must be allowed to be sold elsewhere in the UK. This article is by Andrew Learmonth. The Herald, Tuesday the 14th of June 2022. News. Slave trade history. Sir Geoff Palmer says work ahead could be challenging and uncomfortable. This article is by Deborah Anderson. A dedicated space to address Scotland's role in empire, colonialism and historic slavery should be created and led by a new organisation, as well as tackling racism, are among the key recommendations of a report submitted to the Scottish Government. The Empire, Slavery and Scotland's Museums Steering Group has made several recommendations on how existing and future museum collections and spaces can better recognise the country's slave trade links, but also as part of a national commitment to anti-racism. The Scottish Government is also being urged to demonstrate their support for restitution and repatriation of looted or unethically acquired items in Scottish collections. Other findings of the Empire, Slavery in Scotland's Museum project, sponsored by the Scottish Government, included recommending museums should ensure anti-racism is embedded in their workplaces and public spaces, and that museums should involve the people of Scotland in shaping their work. The steering group's chairman, Sir Jeff Palmer, said there may be challenging and uncomfortable work ahead, but will be worth it to ensure that museums and galleries are for all of Scotland's people. The report also recommended museums should commit to research, interpret, and share the histories of Scotland's links to empire, colonialism, and historic slavery. Charitable Trust Glasgow Life, which runs culture and leisure on behalf of Scotland's largest local authority, is already leading the way in this area. The Herald reported how new interpretation labels are about to be added to displays at Kelvingrove Art Gallery and Museum, aiming to reveal to visitors more about the history of some objects on display and highlighting untold stories behind the collections. Sir Jeff Palmer, chairman of the Empire, Slavery and Scotland's Museums Steering Group, said the recommendations marked a milestone in Scotland's tradition as a forward-looking nation. The scientist and human rights activist said, "Museums hold a special place in my heart, as they offered a haven for me when I first came to the United Kingdom from Jamaica more than 60 years ago. History and education live in museums, and I believe museums could and should be a haven for all." The recommendations by the Empire, Slavery and Scotland's Museum Steering Group mark a milestone in Scotland's tradition as a forward-looking nation. Taking a brave stance, acknowledging the part this country has played in shaping the world of today, and being ready to see that glorious and inglorious histories coexist, support us to move forward in a progressive way. The work that lies ahead may sometimes feel challenging and uncomfortable, but will be worth it to ensure that museums and galleries are for all of Scotland's people. An example of this is a painting by Sir Henry Raeburn of Mr. and Mrs. Robert N. Campbell of Kelsey that hangs in the Scottish Identity in Art Gallery. Will have a further label added that explains that the subjects were owners of a plantation in Grenada with 232 enslaved Africans. Abir Eladnani, Curatorial Assistant, University of Aberdeen Museums and Special Collections, and member of the Empire, Slavery and Scotland's Museum Steering Group, said, "I hope that these recommendations promptly guide the decisions to be made by Scotland's museums and galleries, and that full and honest stories about the objects housed within these colonial structures are made available to the public." She hoped the recommendation, which highlighted the need for change in the way collections are managed and presented, and will gradually become the norm. Scotland has an opportunity to lead this change by implementing these recommendations, Ms. Eladnani added. Culture Minister Neil Gray MSP welcomed the report and added, "The Scottish Government sponsored this independent group as part of our programme for government commitment to look at how our existing museums and those set up in the future can present a more accurate portrayal of Scotland's colonial and slavery history. We will carefully consider these important recommendations and discuss them with the steering group before responding to them. We will continue to work closely with Museums Galleries Scotland to raise awareness of the role Scotland played in slavery and empire and to ensure our collections reflect this. In Glasgow, visitors will see changes taking effect in coming weeks when untold stories of artefacts linked to the slave trade and empire will be explained. Duncan Dornan, head of Glasgow Life Museums, said, "Museums are often the places that tell us most about who we are and who we want to be, so we have to be determined to recognise Glasgow's role in transatlantic slavery and colonialism and how the city benefited. As part of a long-term project that will change how we display and interpret the city's collections, these labels, which are being added at Kelvin Grove, mark an important first step in a continuing process which is beginning across Scotland. Visitors should learn more about Glasgow and our history as a result and understand more about the real cost of some of the city's collections." This article is by Deborah Anderson.
Recorded from the Herald on the 15th of June 2022, from the sports section. Recorded by Amy. Rangers slam SPFL over Cinch renewal deal as Ibrox club claims full vindication. By Aidan Smith. Rangers have hit back at the SPFL, saying their Cinch sponsorship statement is a full vindication of their stance throughout the season. The Ibrox club were adamant they did not have to promote the sponsor's advertising due to a contractual conflict of interest with Chairman Douglas Park's own company, Parks Motor Group. Over the course of last season, Rangers did not use Cinch branding during their home matches or during interviews post-match on television. The SPFL have now confirmed that they have extended their deal with Cinch for the new season, but Rangers are no longer contractually obliged to participate. The Ibrox club reacted, saying, "This is full vindication of our stance throughout the past season and further highlights wide-ranging concerns regarding the corporate governance of the SPFL. Neil Doncaster, Chief Executive of the SPFL, said, "Under the terms of the revised Cinch contract, Rangers are no longer required to participate by providing the sponsorship inventory that they have so far not provided, whilst crucially the overall income to Scottish football is expected to remain materially unchanged over the original 5-year term of the sponsorship. The revised package has now been approved by Cinch Premiership clubs. It's extremely good news that we've been able to work with our partners at Cinch to develop an updated sponsorship package which delivers the same level of financial support to Scottish football whilst providing additional SPFL media assets to Cinch to compensate for loss of Rangers-related rights. It is a testament to the strength of our relationship with Cinch and the high value they place on it and that they have agreed to move forward with us on this basis. The deal gives us further confidence that we will exceed our budget and deliver fees to clubs of more than £27.5 million for season 2021-2022. Murdoch McLennan, chairman of the SPFL, added, "This is a great outcome for the entire game in Scotland. Our friends at Cinch have been brilliant to deal with throughout this whole process. There is much to celebrate in the SPFL as Cinch and our clubs look forward with excitement to the launch of the 2022-2023 fixture list this Friday." A spokesman for Cinch said, "We welcome the evolution of our agreement with the SPFL and are proud of our continued investment into the Scottish football across all 4 Cinch SPFL leagues. We are very much looking forward to the next season and to continuing the stellar growth of our business in Scotland." That article is by Aidan Smith. Recorded from the Herald on the 15th of June 2022, from the sports section, recorded by Amy. Tam Courts completes Budapest Honvéd move after Dundee United exit. By Aidan Smith. Tam Courts has completed a move to Hungarian outfit Budapest Honvéd following his exit from Dundee United. The Terrors announced his shock departure yesterday after having guided the Tannadice club to 4th place in the Scottish Premiership last term. Courts had been linked with a move to Croatia outfit Rijeka, but the deal fell through. Scotsman Chris Docherty is the sporting director of Honvéd, and it is understood he played a crucial role in bringing Courts to the club. The 40-year-old spoke of great delight after agreeing his move, saying, "I know what a great tradition there is for football in this country. I am the type of coach who achieves real success when surrounded by people who have a passion for football. I want to make the fans proud of the club again, to see a team that will do everything on the field to win. The training centre is well equipped and the stadium is beautiful. I am very excited to be a part of this club. Courts led United to their highest placed finish in 9 years and secured European football for the first time in a decade. He also gave 16 academy graduates first team experience, with Archie Meekson, Kieran Freeman and Ross Graham earning Scotland under-21 call-ups. Sporting director Tony Ashgar anticipates making an announcement on a new boss soon. He said, "I'd like to place on record our gratitude towards Tam Courts for the service he has given Dundee United, both as head coach and in his previous role as head of tactical performance. We made a brave appointment last year by promoting from within, but it was a calculated risk that clearly paid off. We enjoyed a lot of success on the field last year and qualified for Europe. This is testament to the culture we have created throughout the club. Tam brought into our long-term strategy to develop some of the finest young talent in Scotland. The fruits of our labour are there for all to see with the recent international call-ups of Archie, Kieran and Ross. But through the course of discussions with Tam, it became clear he was keen to pursue other options and we had to look after the best interests of the club. Following continued discussions, we have now agreed to mutually terminate his contract to allow him time to secure his next opportunity. He leaves with our best wishes, but I would like to assure Dundee United fans that the club is moving in a timely fashion to appoint a new head coach. We've identified a preferred candidate and we anticipate making a further announcement on this in the coming days." The article was by Aidan Smith.
From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 15th of June 2022, from the opinion section, "Is Scotland next in smoking ban race?" by Vicky Allen, senior features writer. Last year, New Zealand announced it planned to become the first country to ban the sale of tobacco to its next generation, with legislation that is due to be passed this year. And when one country starts out on a type of smoking ban generally, a whole host of others join them. England and Wales have a target of going smoke-free by 2030, but a recently published independent review, commissioned by UK Health Secretary Sajid Javid, has now called for reforms to make this happen. Will Scotland follow? Follow? Surely if there's a ban in the offing, Scotland will get ahead. Just because we got the ban on smoking in public spaces first, doesn't mean we're out front. With smoking rates higher in Scotland than England, in 2020 around 14% of adults in Scotland smoked, compared with 12% in England, we could be said to be trailing. So what exactly are the recommended reforms? In 2019, the government set an objective for England to be smoke-free by 2030, meaning only 5% of the population would smoke by then. But the review by Dr. Javid Khan, published last week, warned that the pledge would not be met unless a series of reforms were brought in, and the target of 2030 would be missed by 7 years. Among his 15 recommendations was increasing the age of sale from 18 by 1 year every year until no one can buy a tobacco product in this country. And that could be said to be a gradual ban? Correct. Controversial, I imagine, amongst many Conservatives. Even sounds a bit nanny state to me. Perhaps, if you call nanny state protecting people from a drug that is still the biggest cause of preventable illness and death in the UK. Dr. Khan said the annual cost to society of smoking was around £17 billion and said making smoking obsolete in England would lift around 2.6 million adults and 1 million children out of poverty. England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, added, "The cigarette industry lobbyists will try to make this a debate between health and freedom. It is the most dishonest debate you can possibly imagine. The majority of people who are smokers wish to quit, but they cannot because the cigarette industry has addicted them at a very young age. They cannot. That is not a freedom of choice." And what's going on in Scotland? Scotland has a goal of creating a tobacco-free generation by 2034. The Scottish Government is reportedly currently refreshing its tobacco plan. And that was a report by Vicky Allen. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 16th of June 2022. From the news section, Boris Johnson put ethics advisor in an impossible and odious situation. By Andrew Learmonth. Boris Johnson's ethics advisor said she was forced to quit after being put in an impossible and odious situation. In his resignation letter, Lord Geit said his shock exit came after the Prime Minister asked him this week to give advice on deliberately breaking the ministerial code. He said he had only been clinging on to his position by a very small margin after Partygate. However, he said this week he had been tasked to offer a view about the government's intention to consider measures which risk a deliberate and purposeful break of the ministerial code. This request, he said, had placed him in an impossible and odious position. In his response, the Prime Minister indicated it was over a matter relating to advice on the Trade Remedies Authority. It is thought this could relate to tariffs on Chinese steel. In his letter, Lord Geit said, "My informal response on Monday was that you and any other minister should justify openly your position vis-à-vis the code in such circumstances. However, the idea that the Prime Minister might to any degree be in the business of deliberately breaching his own code is an affront. A deliberate breach, or even an intention to do so, would be to suspend the provisions of the code to suit a political end. This would make a mockery not only of respect for the code, but license the supervision of its provisions in governing the conduct of Her Majesty's ministers. I can have no part in this." In his response, Mr. Johnson wrote, "You say that you were put in an impossible position regarding my seeking your advice on potential future decisions related to the Trade Remedies Authority. My intention was to seek your advice on the national interest in protecting a crucial industry, which is protected in other European countries and would suffer material harm if we do not continue to apply such tariffs. This has in the past had cross-party support. It would be in line with our domestic law, but might be seen to conflict with our obligations under the WTO. In seeking your advice before any decision was taken, I was looking to ensure we acted properly with due regard to the ministerial code." Lord Geit, a former private secretary to the Queen, quitted his post just days after a bruising session with a Commons committee, where he admitted it was reasonable to suggest that the fine he received by the Prime Minister over Partygate was a breach of the ministerial code. Last year, he described resignation as a last resort that sends a critical signal into the public domain. He is the second ethics advisor to have quit Boris Johnson's government in 2 years. The Lib Dems have called for the Prime Minister to come to Parliament to explain more about the dispute. Wendy Chamberlain, the Lib Dem Chief Whip, said, "The Prime Minister now needs to come to Parliament and answer questions about these extremely serious allegations." She added, "The public is sick of the constant lies and cover-ups by Boris Johnson and the Conservatives. They deserve the full truth now." Responding to an urgent question over the resignation in the Commons, Cabinet Office Minister Michael Ellis told MPs, "The government is particularly disappointed, of course, that Lord Geit has taken this decision as, only very recently, as this House knows from the debate last week, significant changes were made to the role and status of the independent advisor on ministers' interests. These changes represent the most substantial strengthening of the role of the independent advisor since its creation." Shadow Cabinet Office Minister Fleur Anderson said, "To lose one ethics advisor was really an embarrassment, but to lose 2 in 2 years, just after the Prime Minister's own anti-corruption czar walked out on him, well, it's becoming a bit of a pattern. It is a pattern of degrading the principles of our democracy. The Prime Minister has now driven out both of his hand-picked ethics advisors to resign in despair in 2 years. It is a badge of shame for this government." The SNP's Alison Theolis described Mr Ellis as the Minister for Defending the Indefensible. She said he had been sent to account for the resignation of Lord Geit, who was no longer willing to do the same. "My constituents see Westminster ministers who break the law with no consequence, no sanctions, no ethics. Is it any wonder they have no faith in this broken Westminster system?" she asked. Mr Ellis would only say that he disagrees with the SNP politician. Tory MP Peter Bone tried to downplay the row, saying the resignation of the peer wasn't something that her constituents care about. "I don't know who Lord Geit is. My constituents don't know who Lord Geit is. I bet half of them don't know who Lord Geit was," he he said, pointing to the opposition benches. He added, Her Majesty's loyal opposition know that if things are as bad as they say they are, the way to get rid of the Prime Minister and his government is to have a vote of no confidence in the government. The loyal opposition have not been willing to do that. I think my constituents will draw their own conclusions about these facts. Mr. Ellis said, Can I gently say to the opposition parties that if they wish for a change of Prime Minister, they ought to do something a bit different from attacking personalities. They should attack policies. But of course, if they were to attack policies, they would find that they would lose. And that article is by Andrew Learmonth.
Recorded from the Herald on the 16th of June 2022. From the sports section. Recorded by Amy. Liverpool agree fee for Calvin Ramsey with Aberdeen set to land record sale. By Ewan Payton. Calvin Ramsey's move to Liverpool has been agreed according to reports. The 18-year-old will move to the Premier League Giants this summer following weeks of talks between the Reds and Aberdeen. Jim Goodwin's side have been looking to secure a club record transfer fee for their prized asset. And according to the Daily Mirror, they look to have secured their wish. Liverpool have agreed to pay £4 million up front for the talented right-back. The Champions League finalists will also pay around £2.5 million in add-ons in the coming years. It is said that with Ramsey and Darwin Núñez in the door at Anfield, that will conclude Jurgen Klopp's spending this summer. The German gaffer is believed to be a big fan of Ramsey, with the Scot set to be competition for the Trent Alexander-Arnold. He made 33 appearances for Aberdeen last term in his first full season of professional football. That article was by Ewan Payton. Recorded from the Herald on the 16th of June 2022. From the sports section. Recorded by Amy. Hibs close to striking deal to sign ex-Rangers youth player Kyle McClelland. By Ewan Payton. Former Rangers youngster Kyle McClelland is reportedly set to sign for Hibs. The Easter Road club are set to be close to securing a deal for the freed Gers defender. The Scottish Sun report that a long-term contract has been offered to the Northern Ireland under-21 star. A number of English clubs were said to be keen on the 20-year-old after he left Ibrox at the end of his contract. But this report states that Hibs manager Lee Johnson's reputation to develop younger players was a defining factor in the move. McClelland was highly rated by Gers chief, coming through the ranks to play for the B team in the Lowland League last term. That article was by Ewan Payton.
The Herald Scotland, Thursday, 16th of June, 2022. Voices. Alison Rowett. The tricky question shadowing President Biden. It was Donald Trump's birthday on Tuesday. He turned 76. Alas, it's too late to send a gift, though you can probably, for a donation, still sign the official card organised by his son, Donald Trump Jr. As per, the Late Show wags queued up to mark the occasion. Pretty impressive. 76 and he can still get an insurrection, said Seth Meyers, referring to the January 6 storming of the Capitol by Trump supporters, an event currently being dissected on prime television by a congressional committee. Mr. Trump is said not to like a fuss on his birthdays. A round of golf and dinner with the family is as wild as it gets. Just as well. It must be difficult to find a gift for the man who has everything, or nearly everything. Unless you can wrap up the election win he claims was stolen from him, a new golf bag, or weirdly long tie that does not quite cut it. In any case, Mr. Trump already has the gift that keeps on giving, and his name is Joe Biden. In the same week that Mr. Trump turned 76, his successor watched his approval rating fall for the third week in a row. It now sits at around the 39% mark, which is worse than Mr. Trump polled at the same stage of his presidency. There is an index of reasons why Mr. Biden is finding the going tough, starting at A for Afghanistan, chaotic withdrawal from and running through the alphabet to Z, zooming inflation rate. Inflation is rising faster in America than in any other G7 country, and now stands at 8.6%, a 40-year high. Much of that was fueled by government spending to contain the economic fallout from the pandemic, the death toll from which passed 1 million in May. As in every other country, Americans are feeling hammered by the increasing cost of living. The very least they expect from their president is that he does something about it. Yet here, as on other matters, Mr. Biden appears as though he is being swept along, powerless against the tide. What sort of president can't keep the supermarket shelves filled with baby formula? He did act on that eventually, but by then the damage to America's reputation was done. In foreign policy, Mr. Biden did live up to his promise to strengthen NATO, though arguably Russia's invasion of Ukraine was the main driving force behind that. While that received bipartisan backing and plaudits internationally, other moves have been more controversial. It was announced this week that his visit to the Middle East in July will take in Saudi Arabia, a country he previously said should be treated as a pariah following the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. That will make an interesting protocol when, as the Saudis have announced, Mr. Biden meets with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the man American intelligence has linked to the killing of Mr. Khashoggi. It was on a visit to Warsaw that Mr. Biden made one of his worst foreign policy gaffes to date, ending a speech on Vladimir Putin with the declaration, "For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power." It was the kind of off-the-cuff, shooter-from-the-lip utterance his predecessor was accused of making. But here it was President Biden, with his decades of experience in foreign policy, touted as one of his greatest strengths, roundly putting his foot in it. Then there are the minor but significant stories about his allegedly short temper. He has lost it on several occasions with reporters, earning him the title of curmudgeon-in-chief from one writer. At a press conference, not realising his mic was still on, he was heard calling a Fox News reporter a stupid son of a bitch. His warning to staff before the election that anyone being rude to another would be fired on the spot does not seem to apply to him should one of them irritate the president during a briefing with an acronym too many. But he is the president. Who cares if the feelings of underlings and reporters are bruised? If they can't stand the heat, etc. Yet, this was not the Joe Biden has sold to the electorate, the solid, dependable, smile-for-everyone kind of guy as praised by Obama. So what happened? You could say that he inherited a divided America that was never going to heal overnight, that he promised too much, that he was just plain unlucky in his timing. Or you could say that he left it too late to become president, that at 79 he is too old to do the job, and he should stand down now and let someone else take a tilt at Donald Trump or an other in 2024. The age question ran through a recent piece in the New York Times headlined, "Should Biden run in 2024? Democratic whispers of no start to rise." Among those quoted was David Axelrod, the advisor who played a key role in steering Obama into the White House. The presidency is a monstrously taxing job, he says, and the stark reality is that the president would be closer to 90 than 80 at the end of a second term, and that would be a major issue. Others have been more openly critical of another Biden run, whether for age or other reasons. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat congresswoman and risen star, was asked recently if she would support him. "We'll take a look at it," was her withering reply. Unfair or not, his age is working against the president. Ronald Reagan, who faced similar doubts about his age, was 69 when he was inaugurated. Joe Biden was 78. Reagan turned his advancing years to his advantage, saying that he would not make age an issue in the campaign against Walter Mondale. "I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience," he quipped. If the Democrats do as badly in the midterms as has been predicted, doubts about a second Biden term will only grow. Mr. Trump poked at his opponent's age mercilessly in 2020 and will do so again. In Mr. Biden's favour, there is no one obviously ready to replace him. It has been a long time since anyone regarded his own VP, Kamala Harris, as president-in-waiting. So he will survive for the same reasons Boris Johnson, 58 on Sunday as it happens, survives. Two politicians who waited lifetimes for powers but did not, in the end, know what to do with it.
Herald Scotland recorded on Thursday 16th of June 2022. Arts and Entertainments. What are ye singing? 9 Inch Nails discover they are not being abused by a Glasgow audience. By Martin Williams, Senior News Reporter. Review, 9 Inch Nails, O2 Academy, 5 stars. It has been some 35 years since Trent Reznor was a leather-jacketed keyboard player with the 80s pop combo Slam Bamboo, happily looking out of place, crooning backing vocals to the cheesiest of synth-heavy tunes. But even then, the dark destroyer of industrial synth rock was planning a whole new environment for himself under the 9 Inch Nails moniker in a 1989 debut album in Pretty Hate Machine that has to go down as one of the greatest rock albums of all time. There's always been more to Reznor than this epic album that took the darkest synth pop of Depeche Mode and smothered it in blood. Wind forward 33 years and we're here in Glasgow for the opening gig of a UK headline tour that exposes all the tenderness, brutality, lovesickness and betrayal that has articulated Reznor's flight of ferocious fantasy over 11 albums and 3 EPs, most of which get an airing here. Well, there are the fretboard thrashing beasts, of which Wish was just one exhilarating thrill ride of face-melting guitar riffs and skyscraping synth scripts. There has been no pinning Reznor down to noise for noise pop's sake. And this set, which is a world away from the industrial greatest hits parade that the band have been parading in the US, exposes just how diverse musically the multi-instrumentalist actually is. And at 57 years young, can Reznor really continue to scream, "I'd rather die than give you control," and really mean it? Well, if not, he deserves an acting Oscar to go along with his Academy Awards for Best Original Score for The Social Network and Soul. The O2 Academy, which had long been sold out for this return to Scotland after 4 years, never looked so packed, and in a fog of dry ice, of course, Reznor and his band blast into year zero's the beginning of the end. From there the darkness is never so black, but the tempo is ever changing and the instrumentation continuously shape-shifting, while the set list remains ever unpredictable. If fans were expecting favourites like Sin or Closer, well, they would be disappointed. Of the less well-known offerings, the manic copy of A, the second single from the 8th studio album Hesitation Marks from 2013, was an undoubted highlight. The Christianity confronting heresy, which 28 years ago might have felt shocking, in Glasgow became a mass sing-along of God is Dead and No One Cares, If There Is a Hell, I'll See You There. People were clearly wanting some Satan. After a rip-roaring The Hand That Feeds and the classic Head Like a Hole, ending the pre-encore menu, Reznor had a question. What is it you're all singing? Cue the audience singing the Glasgow favourite, Here we effing go. The American looked confused and says he needs a translator, but being Glasgow, it had to be sung again and louder. The penny drops. I thought you were singing You're a effing C***, Reznor rasps. The sign-off here shows that beneath the exterior of artful, hard-faced angst rock, there also beats the heart of a good old-fashioned tunesmith. In Glasgow it is heart that remains arguably even more bitter and twisted by being that bit quieter. It was enough to prick up the ears of late country legend Johnny Cash, who covered it. Reznor has probably sung this thousands of times, but it sounded as sincere as if he was singing it for the first time. And when he bellows, "You could have it all, my empire of dirt," it is both thrilling and deeply emotional. By Martin Williams.
The Herald, Friday the 17th of June 2022. News. COVID Scotland. Linda Bald says BA4 and BA5 variants causing new wave. Scotland is experiencing another wave of COVID-19 infections as cases of 2 Omicron variants increase, a public health expert has said. Professor Linda Bald said the Omicron sublineages BA4 and BA5 are part of the reason for the increase in cases and a small but not significant rise in the number of people in hospital. However, she said that vaccines are working well in the vast majority of people and are making a difference between the risk from infection and the risk of severe disease. Latest data from the Office for National Statistics, ONS, showed that around 1 in 40 people in Scotland had COVID-19 in the week ending June the 2nd, up from 1 in 50 the previous week. Professor Bald, a professor of public health at the University of Edinburgh, told BBC Radio Scotland's Good Morning Scotland programme, "I think it's pretty clear to me from some of the data we've seen that we are certainly in another wave of infection. If not already, it will be soon, and that certainly seems to be the case in a number of countries. That is not a big surprise because we did anticipate we would have a rising level of infections every 3 or 4 months potentially. That's what international colleagues have said. It might be surprising to people though because it's summer and they're used to hearing from us that the weather is better, so people are more outside and therefore we reduce the risks through our behaviour. That's true, but what we've got is Omicron and a different type of it, BA4 and 5. There's these Omicron sublineages which seem to be rising in number in the UK, and I think that's part of the explanation why we're beginning to see more cases, and we have seen a small but not significant rise in the number of people in hospital as well. Professor Bald said the vaccines offer good protection against severe disease, but she thinks it likely that the offer of a booster jab may be extended to a wider range of groups in the autumn, beyond what the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, GCVI, has recommended. The GCVI is recommending care home residents and staff, frontline care workers, those aged 65 and over, and adults aged between 16 and 64 who are clinically vulnerable should be given another dose of COVID-19 vaccine in the autumn. Professor Bald said, "Your protection doesn't fall off a cliff, it wanes gradually. Your protection against getting infected actually wanes pretty quickly, and the vaccines are not sterilising, so they are not protecting us against the risk of infection. Your risk of severe disease, I think even beyond months after your dose, you may not be having such a robust antibody response, but other bits of the immune system, B and T cells, are still working against getting very unwell. In older groups whose immunity doesn't last as long, the waning looks quicker. Will we have more people vaccinated in the autumn? Yes, for the over 65s and immunosuppressed. That's what JCVI says. Whether they will extend it to those of us in our 50s and other groups is something they are reviewing. If you were to ask me what I think it's likely they will change that eligibility, but we will wait to hear. We need to give people as much protection as we can, and we are, like influenza, going to have, I think, regular vaccinations in the future for COVID-19. Not for everyone, but for many groups." This article is by Jodie Harrison. The Herald, Friday the 17th of June 2022. News. Glasgow hospital staff anger over £320,000 garden project. This article is by Caroline Wilson. NHS workers have slammed plans to spend £320,000 on a tiny garden at Glasgow's super hospital amid staff shortages and the cost of living crisis. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde is creating an outdoor space for patients and staff on derelict land on the edge of the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital campus. The Health Board said the area, close to Car Park 2, will offer a healing, restorative space that will benefit employees and inpatients with birch trees, wildflower meadows and sheltered seating areas. A spokesperson said the board managed a vast estate and had a duty to conserve and manage biodiversity. However, the project has not gone down well with staff, who questioned the cost for a few planters and fences that are too far away to access on breaks. When the plans were shared by the board on the staff intranet, the post generated around 60 angry comments. The notice has now been removed. One said, "Many wonder how resources can be found for vanity projects like this, when staffing levels, pay, and hundreds, thousands of patients are either trapped in hospital awaiting community services or stuck on ever-growing waiting lists." Another employee said, "We have already plenty of green space with trees and a pond to sit on our breaks. We do not need this tiny garden that's too far from the hospital for us to be able to get to on our breaks. We don't have too long, and the time we do have, we can't waste traipsing to the other side of the site." One worker described the project as nothing more than a smoker's garden. A spokesperson for NHS GGC said, "Improvements to green space and biodiversity play a key role in improving the health and well-being of our patients, staff, and the wider community we serve." NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde manages a substantial outdoor estate, and as a public body we have a duty under the Nature Conservation Scotland Act 2004 to conserve and enhance biodiversity as far as possible. Funding for the project has come from our charitable endowment fund, NHS GGC, and the Scottish Government's Climate Change and Sustainability Capital Funding. As part of our commitment to sustainability and to create an outdoor space for recreation and enjoyment of nature, a derelict site at the QEUH was identified for development. The space will also enhance local biodiversity and will create a space where staff and patients can enjoy green space and take part in growing activities. We hope the new space will be available for all to enjoy later this summer. This article is by Caroline Wilson.
From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 17th of June 2022, from the sports section. First Rangers vs Celtic derby clash date announced by SPFL with all fixtures confirmed. By Ewan Payton. The date for the first Celtic vs Rangers clash of the season has been announced. The first instalment of the derby will be played on Saturday, September the 3rd at 3 p.m. Kick-off is subject to change due to TV rights, with Sky certainly broadcasting the game. Celtic begin the campaign at home versus Aberdeen, while Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's side face a trip to Livingston. The full list of fixtures for all 42 teams were announced at 9 a.m. this morning by the SPFL. The other derbies will be played during the traditional festive period on January the 2nd and then April the 8th. The fourth and final league encounter between the teams will be announced post-split in April. And that article is by Ewan Payton.
Herald Scotland recorded on Friday 17th of June 2022. Arts and entertainments. Books. Sort out your holiday reading list with a fresh batch of new releases by Herald Magazine. Fiction. 1. Night Crawling by Layla Motley is published in hardback by Bloomsbury Publishing, price £16.99, ebook £11.89. Night Crawling might be one of the most horrifying books you'll ever read, but don't let that put you off. It's traumatic but extremely powerful. It tells the story of 17-year-old Kiara in Auckland. Her father's dead, her mother's in a halfway house, and her older brother is too busy making music to take care of her. Unable to find a job and wanting to support both herself and her neglected neighbour, 9-year-old Trevor, she feels forced to make money by selling her body. She falls in with a brutal ring of police officers who treat her horrifically and often don't pay her. It's heartbreaking to see her slowly begin to despise herself for what she's doing when all Kiara wants is to survive. It's hard to say what's more shocking, the fact that it's based on a true story or that Motley started writing it when she was just 17. It's a tough read, but there are glimmers of hope, particularly in Kiara's relationship with Trevor. Motley's haunting writing will stay with you long after you turn the final page. 9 out of 10. 2. London in Black by Jack Lutz is published in hardback by Pushkin Vertigo, price £12.99, ebook £2.99. 2 years after terrorists unleash a nerve gas at Waterloo Station, the unlucky 10% of the population who are genetically vulnerable to suffering an agonising death when exposed still cower in fear of copycat attacks. London in Black, Jack Lutz's frenetic debut novel, follows one such vulnerable, D.I. Lucy Stone, as she investigates the brutal murder of the scientist seemingly close to a precious antidote. Tortured by her harrowing memories and fueled by guilt, Stone relies on boosts to protect her from the nerve gas, but they soon start to lose their effectiveness, adding even more tension to a story that rattles along at breakneck speed. At times over-reliant on the tried and tested tropes of police procedurals, with substance abuse, endless twists and heavy profanity abundant, London in Black is nevertheless gripping, evocative and will keep you guessing. 8 out of 10. 3. Either, Stroke Or, by Elif Batuman, is published in hardback by Jonathan Cape, price £16.99, ebook £9.99. This follow-up to Elif Batuman's highly acclaimed The Idiot picks up the story of Celine, charting her second year at Harvard and still trying to come to terms with her life, sexuality and ambitions. A steady few months of literature-dominated university life at the end of 1996 becomes a roller coaster of parties, alcohol and sex as Celine seeks to find her true identity, helped and sometimes hindered by friends and acquaintances. She wonders if her life could be turned into a novel, and that's exactly what Batuman has done. After a slowish start, the book becomes increasingly compelling, with witty, hilarious observations on life, ranging from serious issues about whether to live according to ethical or aesthetic principles, to the equally serious challenge of finding a boyfriend. 7 out of 10. Non-fiction. 4. Endless Forms, The Secret World of Wasps, by Syrian Sumner, is published in hardback by William Collins, price £20, ebook £12.99. Heard the one about the zombie cockroach? Syrian Sumner goes where other ecological authors have been disinclined to tread, with her impassioned and often extraordinary defence of the much maligned wasp. An evolutionary ancestor of the bee that boasts over 100,000 individual species, Sumner patiently lays out her case for the most unloved of insects, showing it's so much more than just a painful problem at picnics. Consider the emerald jewel wasp, which manipulates its prey, brackets, the much larger American cockroach, close brackets, by delivering a sting to its brain that effectively enslaves it, enabling the wasp to lead it into its lair. Other remarkable morsels abound, admittedly not all to be devoured in a full stomach. While it's perhaps a bit heavy in the science, Sumner's exhaustively researched book ought to be persuasive enough to make you think twice the next time you reach for the swatter. 7 out of 10. Children's Book of the Week. 5. The Breakfast Club Adventures, The Beast Beyond Defence by Marcus Rashford and Alex Falaise Koya, illustrated by Marta Casey, is published in paperback by Macmillan Children's Books, price £6.99, ebook £3.99. Everyone loves a good adventure, right? After young Marcus, 12, loses his favourite football over the school wall, he's invited to join the Breakfast Club investigators, brackets BCI, close brackets. Along with Asim, Lisa and Stacey, Marcus is ready to brave whatever comes their way in search for his beloved ball, which was a gift from his cousin Lola. The case takes them on some daring adventures, with the kids working as a team to find the answers they need. A great story of developing young friendships, delving into some of the issues children of this age group may be facing, and helping them find the tools they need to grow with confidence. It's a brilliant read. You'll be left wanting to see where their investigations take them next. 8 out of 10. By Herald Magazine.
Hello, this is your reader Jackie. This is the Herald on Monday, the 20th of June 2022. News. SNP government warned over addiction crisis amid fears alcohol deaths being neglected. This article is by David Ball. SNP ministers are overseeing an addictions crisis amid concerns alcohol-related deaths are not being tackled with the same urgency as Scotland's record drug deaths. A leading charity has called for a proportionate response to alcohol deaths alongside drug-related fatalities. The Scottish Government has launched a national mission to tackle Scotland having the worst drug death rate in Europe, with £250 million of investment used to try and curb the trend. In the latest released drug death figures in 2020, Scotland recorded 1,339 drug deaths, but also tallied up 1,190 fatalities as a direct result of alcohol abuse in the same year. Ministers have been warned they risk being complacent without more action to curb both alcohol and drug deaths, with concerns raised that the focus on Scotland's record-breaking drug deaths is diverting attention from the number of people dying from alcohol harm, with 2020 recording the highest annual number since 2008. SNP Public Health Minister Marie Todd has confirmed that alcohol treatment guidelines will be rolled out in a similar fashion to those available for medication-assisted treatment standards for drugs harm. But she has been criticised after revealing the standards will not be established until 2024, with a warning issued this could be too late for some with an alcohol dependency. Conservative MSP Miles Briggs has hit out at the complacent strategy by the Scottish Government. He said when SNP ministers acknowledged they took their eye off the ball on drug deaths, I think arguably it feels like they have taken their eye off the ball and continue to on alcohol deaths. Treatment standards are key to this. If we're not going to set any, then health boards and drugs and alcohol partnerships are not going to end up feeling they've not really got to really act on this. Anecdotally speaking to drugs and alcohol partnerships, they are being pressured to get on and reach out to people with drug addiction issues. That is diverting fragile, often vulnerable resources into the work on alcohol. The Lothians MSP acknowledged that services for drug and alcohol misuse often go hand in hand, but warned that there are people with just alcohol addiction issues who are therefore at the back of the queue. Mr. Briggs said, "We know waiting times are awful. We know often people who do have alcohol issues, it's often late presentation when they are coming forward, due to the nature of it when people present with liver failure rather than a preventative model. Unless there's going to be treatment standards, unless there's going to be finance behind it, we're not going to make much progress. It actually points to an addiction crisis, not just with substance misuse and needle injection of drugs, but across the board. Just because drug deaths are so shockingly bad, that doesn't mean that should be the only focus." Mr. Briggs said that a different model of providing services is needed, potentially seeing third sector organisations step up. But he warned it will come down to funding, and it will come down to standards. He said, "We probably don't properly understand the pandemic impact on this yet. If you became addicted to alcohol during the pandemic, they're maybe not even showing up at this moment in time for the damage being caused. It's sometimes years before you see the impact. It could be a decade." A charity has called for proper investment in alcohol services, as well as a focus on prevention. Alison Douglas, Chief Executive of Alcohol Focus Scotland, said, "Who among us hasn't known someone who's had their life damaged or lost because of alcohol? Before the pandemic, almost 1 in 15 of all deaths in Scotland were caused by alcohol. Yet, it is accepted and promoted as an everyday product, leaving us blinkered to the reality of the high levels of harm it causes. The recent focus and effort on the drugs crisis is welcome and much needed, but we also need to see a proportionate response to alcohol. The Scottish Government have taken bold action in the past. Their recognition that alcohol is a public health emergency demands they renew their efforts." She added, "We need real investment in accessible, recovery-orientated alcohol services, to ensure people get the right support when they need it, wherever they live. In addition, preventative measures are required, including increasing the minimum unit price to at least 65 pence, putting restrictions on the heavy promotion of alcohol, and reducing how easily available it is in our communities. Scottish Labour Health spokesperson Paul O'Kane said, "We know that the pandemic resulted in a rise of alcohol deaths in Scotland. These stats show that this heartbreaking trend is not stopping. The SNP has taken its eye off the ball and allowed cuts to drugs and alcohol beds. It is also failing to provide adequate financial resource to key services, including alcohol and drugs partnerships, to deliver more focused support around alcohol consumption. This is unacceptable. We need to put tackling problem drinking at the heart of our recovery from the pandemic." The Public Health Secretary said that both drugs and alcohol deaths remain a priority. Ms Todd said alcohol and drug-related harms are important public health issues in Scotland, which is why we established a national mission to improve and save lives, at the core of which is ensuring that every individual is able to access the treatment and recovery they choose. We are working to ensure people with alcohol use disorder continue to receive the same quality of care as those with drugs misuse. The forthcoming alcohol treatment guidelines will provide support for alcohol treatment, similar to the medication-assisted treatment standards for drugs. We are also developing alcohol treatment targets alongside Stage 2 of the drugs target implementation in 2024. This article is by David Ball.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 20th of June 2022, from the sports section, Matt Fitzpatrick wins US Open after a tense battle at Brookline. And this article is from the Herald Sports pages. England's Matt Fitzpatrick produced a moment of magic on his way to claiming his first major title and a historic double in the 122nd US Open at Brookline. A shot behind playing partner Will Zalatoris with 6 holes to play, Fitzpatrick holed from 50 feet for birdie across the 13th green to draw level and briefly moved 2 shots clear with another one in the 15th. World number 1 Scotty Scheffler closed it within one with a birdie on the 17th, and Zalatoris did likewise in the 16th, but the American agonisingly missed from 14 feet for another in the 18th to force a playoff. The victory means Fitzpatrick joins 18-time major winner Jack Nicklaus as the only players to win the US Amateur and US Open on the same course, Nicklaus doing so at Pebble Beach in 1961 and 1972. With his brother Alex on the bag, Fitzpatrick won the US Amateur at Brookline in 2013, the same year Justin Rose became the last Englishman to win the US Open at Merion. For the second major in succession, Fitzpatrick contested the closing round from the final group, having partnered Mira Pereira in the USPGA at Southern Hills last month. On that occasion, a closing 73 meant Fitzpatrick missed out in the playoff between Zalatoris and Justin Thomas by 2 shots, Thomas securing his second USPGA title in the 3-hole shootout. 3 birdies in the first 5 holes of the final round had vaulted Scheffler into the lead, but Fitzpatrick holed from 7 feet for birdie on the 3rd and 2-putted the short par 4 for the 5th for another driving the green. The 27-year-old from Sheffield then 3-putted the 6th from long range to drop his first shot of the day, but his increased length of the tee paid off again on the par 5 8th as he hit the green in 2 to set up an easy birdie. That took him back to a share of the lead, and he soon led his own as Scheffler dropped his first shot of the day on the 10th, and then 3-putted the 180-yard 11th, the hole which cost him a double bogey in round 3. Zalatoris had almost holed his approach to the 7th, and also birdied the 9th to close within a shot of playing partner Fitzpatrick, who, surprisingly, missed from 4 feet for par on the 10th after splashing out of a bunker. A birdie in the 11th took Zalatoris into the outright lead for the first time, and some moments later he had a 2-shot lead. Fitzpatrick 3-putting from just a few inches closer to the hole on an identical line. However, Zalatoris bogeyed to 12th and saw his lead wiped out in spectacular fashion in the next, Fitzpatrick letting out a massive roar after holing from 50 feet across the green for an unlikely birdie. Another birdie in the 15th, coupled with a bogey from Zalatoris, briefly gave Fitzpatrick a 2-shot lead, but Scheffler and Zalatoris kept up the pressure, with birdies on the 17th and 16th respectively. Zalatoris then left a birdie putt in the 17th, fashionably short, and agonisingly missed from 14 feet in the last, to force what would have been a 4th straight playoff in the US Opens at Brookline. Former Masters champion Hideki Matsuyama posted a closing 65, the lowest round of the week, to claim 4th place and 3 under, with Rory McIlroy and Open champion Colin Morikawa sharing 5th and 2 under. McIlroy felt he was just one great round from claiming a 5th major title, and first since 2014, following a battling 73 on Saturday, but missed 4 birdies and 4 bogeys in his first 18 holes, and eventually signed for a 69. Defending champion Jon Rahm began the final round just a shot off the lead, but struggled to a closing 74. And that article is unattributed.
The Herald, Tuesday the 21st of June 2022. News. Mitral valve repair procedure to be rolled out across UK. This article is by Caroline Wilson. A life-changing procedure for one of the most common heart complaints will now be available in Scotland after a 10-year battle by doctors to see it funded by the NHS. Transcatheter edge-to-edge repair, TEER, is a straightforward solution to a condition that affects hundreds of thousands of people across the UK. Until now, open heart surgery has been the only option available for patients with a leaky mitral valve, which, if left untreated, can lead to blood clots, stroke and heart failure. The 2-hour procedure is performed using keyhole surgery, in which doctors access the mitral valve with a catheter guided through a vein in the patient's groin. 1 or more implanted clips are attached to the mitral valve to seal off the leak and restore normal blood flow. The majority of patients are mobile within a day and can leave hospital shortly thereafter. In one case, a patient who had been in intensive care for 11 weeks was discharged from hospital within a week after having the TEER repair. Around 70% of patients find that symptoms, including breathlessness, get better after the procedure and are able to return to everyday activities, such as walking upstairs and going for a stroll. The mitral valve has 2 leaflets that open and close to allow blood to flow through the heart. If you have been diagnosed with mitral valve regurgitation, it is because your heart's mitral valve is not closing tightly enough, which allows blood to flow in the wrong direction. When blood is not flowing through the heart as it should, it can cause you to feel tired and weak, and in severe cases may lead to heart failure, arrhythmia, heart rhythm problems, or more serious complications. The problem often develops with age as a result of wear and tear or damage caused by untreated high blood pressure. However, mitral stenosis can present in young patients after bacterial infection of the heart or in elderly patients due to deposition of calcium on the mitral valve. Delays in NHS funding have left the UK lagging behind other European countries in access to TEER, with Germany performing 50 times more procedures. The NHS decided not to fund the treatment in 2011, but heart doctors have been pressing for the decision to be reversed. A 2-year evaluation was carried out to prove its effectiveness, but the decision was delayed due to the pandemic. A total of 20 hospitals across the UK will now offer the procedure, including the Golden Jubilee Hospital in Clydebank, which is Scotland's National Heart and Lung Centre. Each centre could perform up to 50 procedures every year, which could lead to hundreds of patients benefiting, including those who are unable to undergo open heart surgery. The incidence of heart valve disease increases significantly with age. Degenerative abnormalities associated with severe aortic stenosis and mitral and tricuspid regurgitation are found in not less than 10% of the population aged over 75. Surgical treatment has been considered for years to be the treatment of choice. However, it was not uncommonly associated with high perioperative morbidity and mortality due to frequent comorbidities and overall frailty of patients. At least 30% of patients with severe conditions are left untreated due to surgical risk. Professor Dan Blackman, interventional cardiologist at Leeds Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust, told the Telegraph this is a life-changing and life-saving procedure. One of the most dramatic results I have seen was a patient who was in hospital for 11 weeks and was stuck on the intensive care unit critically ill. After we performed TEER, he was discharged from hospital in a week. That was a remarkable outcome and highlights just how effective this straightforward procedure can be. This article is by Caroline Wilson.
Herald Scotland recorded on Monday 20th of June 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Happy 80th, Paul McCartney. You are the soundtrack of our lives. By Russell Ledbetter. One day at the height of the punk era, Paul McCartney and his wife Linda were in traffic in London's West End when a gang of aggressive-looking punks hove into view. We were, McCartney would later recall, kind of crouching down a little bit, trying not to get noticed and thinking, Jesus, what are they going to do? And then they noticed us, and one of them comes to the car, so I wound down the window a little bit and he goes, Oi, Paul, that Mull of Kintyre is F*** great. That's the thing about McCartney. It's hard not to be starstruck by him, impossible not to admire the outstanding quality of the countless songs he's written in his time. As author Mark Hertzgaard puts in his Beatles book A Day in the Life, the Liverpool Quartet put together a body of work that equals any in 20th century popular music. Though George Harrison had contributed some fine songs to the group's catalogue, he added, it was the compositions of Lennon and McCartney that made the Beatles the outstanding musical phenomenon. McCartney emerged from the wreckage of the Fab Four to release an impressively lengthy series of albums, some with Wings, others solo, or as collaborations. He's still touring too. This Thursday he plays the last in a succession of dates in North America on his hugely popular Got Back tour. He headlines Glastonbury on Saturday, June 25, and before then this Saturday Sir James Paul McCartney turns 80. He's been world famous since the age of 22 or 23. I've seen McCartney twice in concert, both times in Glasgow, almost 40 years apart, and both times, brackets, the first was at the Apollo in December 1979, close brackets, but particularly on the second occasion, a sold-out Hydro, December 14, 2018, I was struck time and again by the mere fact that on stage, just a few hundred yards away, was one of the truly pivotal figures of pop and rock music. There aren't many of them left now who are still on the road, still visible. It's a privilege to be able to see them in concert. Bob Dylan, 81, is on a world tour that will take him up to 2024. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, both 78, are playing stadium shows to mark the Rolling Stones' 60th anniversary. Eric Clapton at 77 is currently on tour. Neil Young, 76, Elton John, 75, and Robert Plant, 73, are still working. Beach Boys' Brian Wilson, 79, and Mike Love, 81, are too. The Who's Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey, 77 and 78 respectively, are playing dates across North America in October, brackets. Daltrey himself is at the Armadillo on July 6, close brackets. Don Henley, 74, is with the Eagles at Murrayfield in June 22, Bruce Springsteen, a relative stripling at 72, recently announced an international tour with his E Street Band starting next year. Van Morrison, 76, is still playing live and releasing albums. But there's something about seeing McCartney on stage, mock chiding the audience for whipping out their phones to record the classic songs and putting them away when he dares play a newer one. You think of his storied past as you watch him in action. It's almost as if the soundtrack to your life is being played out in front of you. The songs he plays, the songs he doesn't, they all remind you of his signal achievements, his restless creative genius, Sgt. Pepper, Yesterday, Eleanor Rigby, Hey Jude, Abbey Road, Penny Lane, Get Back, A Day in the Life, A Hard Day's Night, Can't Buy Me Love, Ticket to Love, Maybe I'm Amazed. You think of the band's Hamburg gigs when they honed their craft. You think of the early Fabs wowing America and the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964 and already on top of the world. You think of Macca's post-Beatles band Wings and all their hits. Live and Let Die, Band in the Run, oh yes, and Mull of Kintyre. It stirs the blood, even now. Sometimes we do this song in concert when we're in expat places like Canada and New Zealand, McCartney recalls in the lyrics, a 2-volume book about his songs that was published late last year. We've got some security guys who are Scottish and you can see them welling up. But those Beatles songs, as Mojo magazine observed earlier this year, the band's 12 albums, it's 13 if you count Magical Mystery Tour, which was released in America, close brackets, really did lay the foundations of the 5 decades of pop and rock music that followed. McCartney himself makes a revealing but justified assertion in the lyrics. Lennon, he says, had been the collaborator with whom I'd done some of the best work of the 20th century. Brackets, he said modestly, close brackets. Who can gainsay him? Hamish Stewart, once of the Average White Band and a member of McCartney's touring band in the late 80s and early 90s, told author Ken McNabb for his book The Beatles in Scotland that he genuinely believed that McCartney could get a tune from a stone. Music's in his DNA, it just flows out of him, almost like a curse, said Stewart, but what a curse. It's amazing too to think of the industry that has sprung up around the Beatles. Hundreds of books have been written about them since 1964. Music magazines bring out commemorative issues, retelling and repackaging the story of John, Paul, George and Ringo. There have been films and documentaries, the most recent being Get Back, Peter Jackson's epic docu-series covering the making of the 1970 album of the same name, with treasurable footage of the rooftop concert the band played atop the Apple Corps building in Savile Row. The documentary caused a huge stir when Disney Plus premiered it in late 2021. And after a long wait it will be released on DVD and Blu-ray in July 12. Today there are many online radio stations that play nothing but Beatles songs. These same songs feature on audio streaming platforms, brackets they have 26 million monthly listeners on Spotify for example, close brackets. The official Beatles website offers a multiplicity of gift ideas. Fans continue to pay homage to the Abbey Road studios and on the street outside recreate the band's walk across the zebra crossing. The new book, The Lyrics, is worth reading, by the way. It sheds interesting light on McCartney's creative process and the joys he derived from the simple pleasures on his farm in Kintyre and on his relationship with Lennon, whom he had first met at a Liverpool church fete on July 6, 1957. He touches on the band's controversial breakup and the involvement of Alan Klein, the hard-nosed New York businessman who took control of the band's business affairs in 1969. McCartney loathed Klein. In the aftermath of the breakup, Lennon wrote How Do You Sleep, an untoo subtle attack on McCartney. Its line, the only thing you done was yesterday, was, says McCartney, apparently suggested by Klein. At the back of my mind, McCartney says, the hurt's still evident. I was thinking, wait a minute, all I ever did was yesterday. I suppose that's a funny pun, but all I ever did was yesterday, Let It Be, The Long and Winding Road, Eleanor Rigby, Lady Madonna, F***, you, John. Elsewhere in the book, however, McCartney alights in Here Today, a love song to Lennon, written shortly after his friend was shot dead in 1980. There is, says McCartney, a longing in the lines, if you were here today and I'm holding back the tears no more, because it was very emotional writing this song. I was just sitting there in that bare room thinking of John and realising I'd lost him. Performing the song on his own in concert is, he adds, a very charged experience. McCartney says he could have approached his new band Wings in one of two ways, either coming in at the top as a Beatle alongside a former member of Small Faces or Cream and make what they used to call a supergroup, or I could just start something that felt good and try to build it up like the Beatles had. I chose the latter. The songs have continued to pour out of McCartney in the decades since. His website lists his decade-by-decade track record, from 12 albums and 4 tours in the 70s and 8 albums in the 80s, through to 3 albums and 1 tour so far in the 2020s. He was knighted in 1997 and made a Companion of Honour in 2018. Why does he keep touring and recording? He certainly doesn't need the money. The latest Sunday Times Rich list puts his joint wealth with wife Nancy Sheville at £865 million. Brackets, she is an estimated £50 million, close brackets. He said in interviews that he loves making music so much, it really is in his blood. If I retired, I'd still do exactly what I do, he said in one interview, so I may as well not retire. Retire from what? I'd do this for nothing. He plainly loves engaging with audiences. They are, he says, what keeps things fresh night after night. In the end, as he put it, the people are the main thing. There was certainly never any sense of McCartney going through the motions when he played the Hydro in December 2018. The sheer quality of the songs helped, of course. How could they not? But McCartney's engaging personality, his sense of humour, his stagecraft, his mere presence, all made it a memorable night. In the crowd that evening was the journalist and author Ken McNabb. McCartney's imprint on modern music, he believes, is simply immeasurable. Comparisons between musical artists are a futile and often glib exercise, but McCartney stands alone by simple virtue of his gifts that have touched so many people's lives through 6 decades. The only genuine point of reference is Mozart, but I think Paul trumps even him, he said this week. No one in popular music can match his almost surreal facility for crafting songs with the kind of earworm melody and hook that, even after just one listen, draws you into his world. It's an unfathomable and magical well of talent that even now continues to mine new songs. Even Dylan, not a man known for fawning endorsements of his contemporaries, is on record as saying McCartney is the only musician he's in awe of. Quite a compliment. McNabb says that while Lennon was the beating heart of the Beatles, McCartney was the unapologetic cheerleader-in-chief, forever corralling them back to the studio and encouraging them to reach new heights of creativity. But it's an ineluctable truth. Without McCartney, you don't have the Beatles. The Get Back documentary captures in real time how he began writing the titular song and his bass guitar in the studio, and within an hour or so it had reached a mighty bloom. Remember too, this is the guy who wrote Yesterday, still the world's most recorded song, when he was just 21. Let that sink in for a moment, and then let your mind leaf through the pages of a catalogue of some 1,500 songs that include Eleanor Rigby, Blackbird, All My Loving, For No One, Hey Jude and Let It Be, the song that has grown into an anthem for the world alongside Lennon's Imagine. The dissolution of the Beatles in 1970, a move instigated by Lennon, hit McCartney hard and forced him to take stock of his life. But McNabb adds, anyone who thinks that McCartney really did die with the end of the Beatles hasn't been listening. Band on the Run may remain for many the high watermark of his solo albums, but that bar was often reached with the likes of Ram, Flowers in the Dirt, Venus and Mars, The Peerless Tug of War, Flaming Pie, Chaos and Creation in the Backyard and Memory Almost Full. With his 2018 album Egypt Station, McCartney earned his first Billboard #1 in several decades. 2 years ago he released McCartney 3 to worldwide acclaim. It's easy to dismiss his music as a lightweight confection, McNabb concludes, but that would be to do him an enormous disservice. If you take a deep dive into his work, you'll see an irrepressible musician who's impossible to delineate. Anyone looking to go off the Macca track would be advised to listen to his work with the producer Youth, which showed Paul at his avant-garde best. Yes, there have been occasional tapering off in quality, but surely that's inevitable with any artist whose longevity is part of their appeal. Their true worth is in the songs we remember and treasure, and on that point Paul McCartney remains unrivalled. I doubt his output will ever be matched. A tough question to end with, but does McNabb have a favourite McCartney track? He pauses and acknowledges that it's an impossible task. Over the years I've become increasingly fond of Let It Be, but ask me tomorrow and I might pick something like Maybe I'm Amazed or Listen to What the Man Said. There are simply so many, but I will say this, I will never tire of hearing him. The reason is simple, the songs make me happy, and that is his true legacy. McCartney 80 should give us all pause for thought. At the Hydro, no one could deny that his vocal gifts, once so sublime, are in irrefutable decline. But if he wants to keep playing live and people still want to see him perform, after 6 decades he's surely earned that right. Besides, one day the candle will go out, so enjoy him while you can. His records will never be beaten. By Russell Ledbetter.
And that was this week's The Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.